Hey guys, so if you watched my recent Blick haul, you will remember that I bought some Kakimori supplies as well as a shuttle nib from Colorverse. So today we're putting those to the test. We're testing out the Kakimori Tototo ink. This is a pigment-based ink. We are testing out the brass Kakimori nib as well as the Sakura holder. We are testing out the Colorverse Shuttle Nib as well as the Kakimori brush pen filled with the Tototo ink. We are going to test for shading, we're going to test for writability, and we're also going to try inking with the brush pen, a dip pen filled with the, or a G nib filled with the Tototo ink, the Kakimori nib, and the shuttle nib on 3 different papers. We're going to be testing it out on smooth Bristol, vellum Bristol, and watercolor paper. And we're also going to be testing it for waterproofness, and not by fountain pen people standards, but by watercolor artist standards. So hi, I'm Becca Hilburn. I'm a watercolor comic artist. I have an MFA in sequential art from SCAD, and I am here to share my knowledge with you guys. Hey guys, so in the art haul video I shared with you guys recently, we received, or I purchased, a Kakimori and a Colorverse nib, but unfortunately neither would fit in my, I would argue, fairly standard Tachikawa or Kuretake nib holder. I'm going to demonstrate that for you guys because I know some folks just need to see it, and I do want it all in one video. But to remedy that problem, and because these are fairly expensive nibs that I would like to be able to use, I also purchased the least expensive of the Kakimori nib holders. And since I was already on St. Louis Art Supply, I purchased a bottle of their beautiful pigment ink in Totoro color. We're entering the month of October. You guys might be interested in spending some of your time inking, particularly inking with traditional materials. I have a bunch of really helpful inking tutorials, whether you're interested in inking with brush pens, dip pens, brushes, or even technical pens. So make sure you check out the cards and the description down below for loads of resources to help you on your inking journey. So even though I opened some of these in the haul video, I wanted to reopen them again since some of you guys are new here. Hi, hello, welcome. I'm so glad to see you. And if you are old here, welcome back. It is always a delight, especially as the weather gets colder and we're getting ready to do some inking mischief. So this is the Kakimori metal nib. It comes in 2 different types, brass and stainless steel. They are made in Japan. This was purchased through Blick. I will put the price on the screen for you guys. This is also available through St. Louis Art Supply. If you would prefer to give your business to them, that is understandable. So what this is a fairly sturdy, fairly heavy metal nib, all metal nib. Give me a moment to free it of its earthly confines. There we go. And this is a pointed nib, but it is meant to hold a tremendous amount of ink. A tremendous amount of ink. Kind of like a glass nib is where my ADHD brain was going, and it just compressed everything into, you know, one word. Great. So, if you've watched the channel, you know I do like caged nibs, particularly caged G nibs. These are a pointed nib and a flexible pointed nib at that. That is my preference as a comic artist. These are not going to be flexible. That's not the point of them. They are supposed to be long inking pins. So these are going to be a single line width. So more similar in terms of what kind of line you're going to get to like those speedball lettering nibs. I'll put one on the screen for you guys so you guys can see. Or like a felt tip nib, something that is a single line width, rather than something that is flexible and can deliver a variety of line weights, kind of like the G nib or some of the Tachikawa spoons, or a Croquill nib. So this is the Kakimori brass. This is a Colorverse nib. These are actually Korean, and they are kind of meant to go with Colorverse inks. Now, I didn't purchase any Colorverse inks. I have a lot of fountain pen inks, and the only reason I got the Kakimori is because it is a pigment-based ink, and pigment-based inks are typically waterproof, and since I am a watercolor artist, I could actually use that. So the Colorverse actually comes with a little bit of information. So your infinite journey with shuttle. So this is their shuttle nib. And this was also purchased on Blick. I will put the price up on the screen for you guys. And then I will also put like both prices for you to compare. They do look fairly similar. I don't know if they're exactly the same though. We are going to be comparing the two. This is, I think, an aluminum nib. So on one side, our information is written in Korean. On the other side, it is in English. Your infinite journey, your infinity journey with shuttle. The shuttle project is more than just a writing tool. It is a stationary item crafted to make daily life more distinctive. The name shuttle draws inspirations from the space shuttle, a vessel that performs vital missions between Earth and space. This vision is reflected in the shuttle nib, which precisely delivers ink to paper, reminiscent of a shuttle's journey through space. Engineered for versatility, the nib features optimized feed lines and depth in its ink reservoir. That's the little divot right there, enabling seamless transitions between fine lines and bold strokes. We will see about that. I guess you like angled the pen to get, or the nib to get a wider stroke. Inspired by spacecraft windows, the circular groove helps the nib hold more ink when tilted. Okay. Material properties. Brass can change, so this also comes in brass and aluminum, whereas the Kakimori comes in, I had it marked, brass and stainless steel. Oh, there is actually a little tiny bit of paperwork with the Kakimori. We'll revisit that. So brass can change color over time due to natural aging. Without an anodized finish, aluminum is susceptible to everyday scratches and may corrode in high humidity or salty environments. Precautions for use. Avoid applying excessive force, dropping the product, or scratching it with sharp objects, as this can cause deformation or damage. Damage caused by negligence or intentional misuse is not eligible for repair, replacement, or refund. Slight variations in polish and minor scratches may occur during the manufacturing process due to the nature of metal products. The nib has been tested, but performance may vary depending on the user's writing style and environment. Ink flow may differ based on the type and amount of ink used. Clean the nib thoroughly after use, remove any moisture, and store it in a dry place. If ink dries on the nib, rinse it under running water and gently scrub with a soft brush. Use neutral detergent if needed. So this comes in kind of a little foam holder. And because it is aluminum, it is much lighter than the brass Kakimori nib. And let me see if I can get it so you get, yeah, good. So you can see both the grooves and the little space shuttle window. Now, going back to the Kakimori, we do actually have a little bit of paperwork. Insert the nib holder with a gentle twist until fully seated. To remove, twist and pull slowly. Forceful removal may dislodge the nib mount. That is heavy. Metal nib. Use and care guides. One side is written in Japanese with a QR code. The other side is written in English. Nib holder sold. There we go. Nib holder sold separately. Recommended for use with Kakimori and inkstand pigment inks. We do actually have a Kakimori ink. The maximum writing angle is 45 degrees. The nib has a protective coating and may require several uses to reach optimal ink flow. When removing from a nib holder, gently twist to avoid dislodging the nib mount. Due to its precision design, impact to the nib may affect ink flow. To prevent the buildup of dry ink in the grooves, rinse with water regularly during use. When inserting into a nib holder, ensure the nib mount is dry. Water or ink inside may cause resistance. To remove stubborn dry ink, gently scrub in water with a soft toothbrush. If using detergent, a pH-neutral detergent is recommended. Alkaline detergents will damage the metal surface and should be avoided. Residual moisture may cause rust. To store, detach from the nib holder and dry thoroughly. Brass develops a natural patina over time. So, that is the Kakimori. That is the Colorverse. And then here is the nib holder. I purchased this from St. Louis Art Supply after I realized that that is a little bit different than the nib holders I have. So maybe that is a good thing. So This is a Kuretake nib holder. This is a Tachikawa nib holder. They are both very loved, but you can see they both have these plastic rings that have rings inside of them so they can hold both crow and larger nibs like a G nib. I really like these nibs like for personal use, and if you are into dip pins, this is what I would recommend, you know, if you wanted to upgrade from this kind. They also have the less expensive smaller ones. I think Tachikawa makes these, so if you don't want they're just as round as these, but if you want a smaller nib holder because you work in kind of a cramped space, they do have a smaller one. Kakimori also makes a smaller, so this is actually longer than my two nib holders. Kakimori actually does make a smaller one, but it costs the same as this, and I figured I would get the standard one. So this is the Kakimori holder. This is the Kakimori nib. You do push, it does fit snugly, but it doesn't feel like you're forcing it. Also, the fact that it is longer kind of balances out the fact that this brass nib is heavier. And then I wanted to try it with the shuttle nib. Ooh, doggone it. I was hoping they'd be the same size, so I'd only have to buy one holder. Oh my gosh. Why? Will it work better? I did try it in this, but I also didn't want to push it. Yeah, I think it's sturdy enough that I can try it with this, but if I want to use this for any significant amount of time, I'm gonna have to get the holder for it, it feels like, because yeah, I don't want to force it, and I don't want, you know what I mean, like if it just fit, like, let me show you. G nib, you do push it some, but it doesn't necessarily feel like you're going to damage the product by pushing it in. So you want a tight fit, but not a fit that's going to feel like it's going to break the product. And then finally, the Kakimori ink in the color Totoro. And if you've watched my channel for any time, you do know I like pigment-based water or fountain pen inks. So I decided, in fact, I have a small but nice collection of Sailor Storia inks that I need to pull out and use. This I felt like, because it's and we're going to swatch this, is a beautiful, almost like skin tone adjacent color. It's like a reddish brown. I thought it would just be a beautiful addition that would get a lot of use because I draw a lot of people. So pigment ink use and care. This product is a pigment ink. Shake well before use. If swallowed, give fluids and seek medical advice. If in eyes, flush with running water and seek medical advice. Store in a cool, dry place away from direct sunlight. Use pen regularly to prevent ink from drying out in the nib. So they're talking about if it was in a fountain pen, because this is also a fountain pen ink. I believe that's how it was. Now I have to double check. So, hi editing Becca. Would you bring up the listing for this ink on St. Louis Art Supply so that we can see what it says? Designed and tested for pens sold at Kakimori, may not be compatible with other pens. Please wipe off the ink on the cap/bottle screws with a soft cloth before storing. Bottle cap, Sakura wood used. What? There is no Sakura wood here. Japan, are you getting Sakura wood? Y'all are getting a nicer one. So unfortunately, neither of these two care guides apply to this. This is a plastic cap. It is not Sakura wood, and it is not aluminum. Guilty because I feel like with inks and a nib and nibs and a nib holder that are so beautiful, I should really go to the effort of it being like a beautiful aesthetic fountain pen girly kind of shot. But I am a chaotic art gremlin, and this is my work desk, so it is not as aesthetic or pretty as, you know, some of you guys might be accustomed to if you watch fountain pen reviews. But it is very real. So what I'm hoping to do today is I am hoping, and hoping it's today. It'll be today for you regardless, but I actually have a local environmental activism meeting to attend. So I don't know if I will finish this. And we're also in the middle of car shopping, so my week has been kind of crazy. But I want to get this out before October starts, or right around the start of October. So what I'm hoping to do today is clean the nibs and at least ink up the Kakimori with the Totoro ink in the Sakura holder, and maybe actually ink something, or at least start inking something. I also want to swatch the ink so you guys can see it. Now, obviously, ideally, I would do some full testing. Usually when I'm dealing with pigment inks, I like to do a little watercolor test. We will see. We will see what ideas suggest themselves. I always have these videos chaptered out, so if you're looking for spoilers, you can surf through the chapters and find the part that is the most appealing to you. So one of the unique things that I bring to YouTube, and have brought to YouTube for like 13 years now, is that I have a Masters of Fine Art in Sequential Art, which means I have an MFA in making comics. And traditional inking techniques was part of my education, and I've tried to share what I've learned with you guys over the years. And the reason I bring this up is because the Colorverse nib, the Kakimori nib, these have been reviewed pretty extensively by, drumroll please, fountain pen people and calligraphers, and that's wonderful. But I am here for the illustrators and the comic artists, and hopefully I can answer whether either of these nibs are worth the honestly substantial investment, because the nib, or the nib holder for the shuttle nib, is about 60 bucks. Whereas the Kakimori is about 30 bucks, and they will not easily work with nib holders that you already have. So it says to clean the nibs in a pH neutral soap if you wish to clean them. I have always cleaned my nibs because they tend to have manufacturer's oils on them to prevent them from rusting or developing a patina while they are in storage and in transit. So, interesting thing about that, looked it up. Regular Dawn dish soap, which is what I historically have used to clean my fountain pens in a very watered down solution, just to remove that surface grease, that is actually rather alkaline, you said? Rather basic. They do not want you using alkaline soaps for that. Rubbing alcohol, one of the things I would usually use to clean off my nibs, other than using a lighter to burn off that oil, that is actually rather acidic. So neither of them are truly pH neutral. However, the 7th generation citrus dish soap that we buy is actually closer to neutral. It is still not neutral, but it is closer to neutral. It's actually a little bit acidic than either of the other two. So that is what I'm going to use. I am not necessarily recommending you use any of those three to clean your nibs. That is just what I'm going to do, and it's kind of just based on my own habit. You guys also see I have 3 printouts here. This is my own art. It is hard to see. It is a cat with a pumpkin. If you watch my channel, you might remember this from either last year or 2 years ago inking tutorial, where I demonstrated using nibs, brushes, brush pens, and like microns, fine liners, or technical pens to ink, and what that can bring to your art. And I did it on a smooth Bristol and a vellum Bristol, bringing that energy back today. We have our kitties on smooth Bristol. We have our kitties on vellum Bristol. And because this hopefully won't tear up the paper the way a sharp pointed nib might, I have some Strathmore 300 series watercolor paper. All of these are a cheaper artist grade paper, yes. Part of it is because I often will supply the materials for my own classes, and I have to do what I can afford to do. Part of it is they handle pretty well for most users, and I tend to only go up in terms of Bristol quality when I'm selling a piece, or if I'm looking for very specific properties. So I have used their 500 series plate Bristol for inking comics before. I do actually really like it, but it can be hard to find and kind of expensive. And also, it's not necessarily available easily in 9x12. So this was actually part of my class prep for an inking class that I'm teaching with the St. Charles Parish Public Library. So that's also partially why I am using these papers. It's what I can afford for a class setting. So I am going to go clean these 2 nibs in a very weak solution of dish soap and water, and then dry them off very carefully. And then we can proceed to the next part of our test, our review, our talking about it. Not super sure where we're gonna fall with this just yet. Little correction here, not even editor's correction yet, because it's still me. Hi, hello. My husband, who works in the same room as I record in and actually looked this information for me up the first time, pointed out that I actually got it backwards, and I appreciate him doing that because it saves me an edit later on. Rubbing alcohol is 6 through 8 pH, with 7 being neutral. The dish soap that I said I was going to use is 5 pH, and regular Dawn is even lower than that. So that would push it towards, I guess, basic. I'm sorry. Acidic? What? Acidic?
0 is a strong answer.
Wow, dang. Okay, acidic. I'm so sorry. Chemistry was not my strong point. Can you tell? And we're playing the new iSomnium game, which we're literally on the puzzle where you are using a pH scale to solve problems. This week has been really rough, so please forgive me. Anyway, so I'm actually going to go ahead and use rubbing alcohol on these instead. And the plus side to rubbing alcohol is that it should not cause any kind of rust. If you're an art nerd like me, these adorable art supply prints are now up in the Natto shop. I should have mentioned this before, but I literally just found it because it fell off my stack of stuff. I also have the Kakimori color liner brush. So this is like a wick based system that you soak up, and then you have a brush pin. So I will be inking this up with this beautiful Totoro ink and using this too because I am such a brush pin girly. Okay, y'all, let's swing back around to the one I missed earlier. This is the Kakimori color liner brush. So still made in Japan. And this was also purchased through Blake. Inside is our plastic brush with a metal clip. And I'm going to read the instructions before I start really fiddling with this. So the instructions seem to be written. No, okay, there's English underneath. Okay. So we have our 3 sections. We have this bottom section, which pulls out, and we have our wick. It seems to be a foam wrapped in plastic. And then we have the top part of our pin. So we have our cap with a clip, and then we have our, I'm not sure if that's removable, and I have the shaky hands today, so I don't want to pull it out, but it looks like it could function as a double-sided brush. This, I cannot tell you if this is fiber or foam. Knowing Japan, it might be foam, so I'd be excited about that. And then when reassembled, the nib, or the wick, gets pushed into the nib and it draws through capillary action. So to fill it with ink, we soak the, there we go, sorry. No, oh no, it got stuck in there. I goofed. Oh, I goofed. Boy, did I goof. So it was in this way so it wouldn't push it up. And then to demonstrate it, I pushed it up. Oh no. That's not great. All right, I'll be back in a minute. If that happens, you can just kind of violently shake it loose. So to fill this with ink, and here we have the Kakimori, it's Totoro, I believe. Yep, no, Tototo. So 3 2s in a row. And this is actually a very nicely angled bottle. So it's got a nice squat bottom. So it should be spill proof. And voila. So to fill this, we want to fill it or leave it to soak until it is 2 centimeters from the top. Flip it over and then insert it. This is why I love comics and other kind of infographics. It makes it so much easier for people to understand. So place the fiber ink reservoir with the plastic covering intact, so don't remove that, in the ink bottle. Allow the fiber to soak up the ink, leaving about 2 centimeters dry, then remove. Wipe off the excess ink around the plastic. So we're going to do that. I'm going to switch angles so that you guys can enjoy that. little gap there, that's user error. I should have held it up straight. That's on me. Okay, so then with the, trying to juggle this, one hand. Okay, with the cap on, they want you to insert it fuller side in, and then put the plunger in. Insert the ink reservoir from the soaked into the pin body. Insert the end plug and push firmly until it clicks twice. It may help to press against a hard surface. Allow a few moments for the ink to reach the tip, and the pin is ready for use. So just so that you guys can see which end, and I'm going to turn it upwards, and I'm going to push down. I didn't get a second click, so I'm going to ask Joseph to push it even further down for me so I get that second click. He was able to get that second click, and you can already see that the ink has run to the brush. Now, there are a few companies that are doing these kind of like fill it yourself with your favorite ink or with our ink kind of brush companies. Like Kuretake has, I think they call it the Ink Lab, and you can actually mix your own colors with this. But I think this is really kind of neat, and if you don't mind spending some money to kind of experiment, this could be a fun way to fill a brush pen with your favorite fountain pen ink, whether you prefer to use brushes for calligraphy or you're like me and you'd like it to use it for your inked art. And love the portability and how like clean and tidy it is to be able to bring this around in like your pencil bag. It is finally time to actually start swatching and playing around with these things. So what I wanted to do is we're gonna basically be using the Kakimori ink for everything. And what I wanna do is give a color swatch first using a brush. Normally I would decant this into like a dinky dip or something. This is a pigment ink, and it is a beautiful red-violet kind of color. Now, this is a smooth Bristol, so we may not see as much like color variation or sedimentation if that is a property of this ink on this paper. Next, we're going to try out the brush pen. So it is a fairly lightweight brush pen. These are also available in like fixed with like fine liner sort of tips. There is actually, oh my gosh, this is like drawing with a lip stain or like a berry juice. It's such a pretty color. I give Basil, well, I like to drink hibiscus tea, and I like to give Basil like raspberries and, you know, dried hibiscus, and this is that color. It's so pretty. Like blackberry juice. The nib has some flex to it. You could definitely refill it from your bottle unless it dries in the thing, which would be, you know, probably something to find out in a while, but I like this little pen, and I love that I could fill it with such a pretty color, and now it gets to live in my pencil case, and hopefully I'll find myself reaching for it. So next, I know I'm driving some of you guys probably nuts. I am going to do a dip with a caged G nib. Give you guys an idea of the color, kind of in a mass tone or in a pile tone, because with these kind of dip pens, they deposit a lot of ink, so you're going to get a thicker application than with a brush. It is a beautiful color. I would say for my fountain pen friends, and I want to double check, okay? Double check to make sure that this ink is a fountain pen ink, but this could be a gorgeous color for documents that are not legal documents, right? Okay. Let's finally try the Kakimori nib and the Kakimori holder. They said twist it in. Okay. And then I'm going to dip it. I don't want to get it on the wood, so I don't want to dip it all the way. But here it is. I'll give it a shake to see if it drip drops. Actually, that holds on pretty good. It does start to bead up, but like you can give it a few shakes before it drips. And look how absolutely beautiful that ink is on that nib. Just want to remind you guys, I paid for this out of pocket, so all opinions are my own. This actually writes smoother than my experience with glass nibs. It's a fixed width nib, but it is a very smooth ride, and I'm kind of just gonna do these little zoop zoops until we run out of ink flow. Oh my gosh, this is so neat. It holds so much ink. I am starting to run dry, so I'm gonna tilt it up and see if that helps with ink flow. And while I did clean it, I didn't get into the grooves, so I see that there is still some ink there. That might be sticking to the oils that were in the grooves of the pen, something like that. They did say it's going to take a few uses to, you know, kind of work it into what, normalcy? Work it into like normal working condition. You do want to hold it at an angle, it seems like, because holding it straight up, we'd get like nothing. I would say it's a little thinner than a 0.8 in terms of like a micron, maybe around a 0.5. And I believe if you hold it, oh, that's neat. So it's kind of like a Fude fountain pen, where if you change the angle, you can actually change the size of your stroke. So if you get used to this, this could be really fun for, look at that, look at that, look how wide that gets. That's so neat. This could be really fun for calligraphy people, in addition to being fun as an artist pen, of course. That is super cool. It actually does some very interesting things and solves a couple problems. I like that. I like that a lot. So that is the brass Kakimori nib, and I'm going to wipe it off just to show you guys. And I probably won't want to, they did suggest using like a gentle brush to get in there, or a toothbrush is what Colorverse suggested, so I may do that to get that like ink out. Since this is a pigment based ink, you know, I don't want to let it just dry, because unlike water-based fountain pen inks, a pigment based ink may be much harder to remove. It's not like I could just like dip it in water. So to remove this, and that's me adjusting my camera to give myself some room. They said to give it a gentle, or to twist it. Ha, okay. All right. Very cool. Okay. So then we have the Colorverse Shuttle Nib. And I'm going to use the incorrect holder just for the time being. There we go. I got it somewhat seated into a Kuretake nib holder. This is just so we can ink it up and demonstrate it. I actually have some Sailor Hokuro pins. Oh, see, I wasn't able to fill up the window. Let me see if I can do that. There we go. Got a dip for the window. This is not the recommended ink for this, but these are so similar, I figure it'll be okay. Oh, this is much scratchier than the Kakimori. It's been a long day. Kakimori nib. There is no give to this either, but this is very scratchy. So I think the Kakimori nib could possibly ink on a cotton rag watercolor paper. This is about as scratchy as a G nib. So you do get some feedback. So if you like some feedback, this is one of those. But you might notice that this and this, this one has a much sharper point, a much sharper angle. This is more like my experiences with using a glass nib. it's actually pretty scratchy. So a paper where like there's individual fibers, this one might not be as good. Oh, I like how I'm not even doing I need to do the how long will this last test. So this is the aluminum shuttle nib. I don't know if the brass one would perform like less scratchy. I don't know if it's the aluminum that's giving so much feedback. This one also has that circular reservoir on it. So from what little I've seen, these are really more marketed towards stationery. So like letter writing, note taking, that sort of thing. And that's where the really extreme ability to hold on to so much ink kind of comes in. But, you know, as a comic artist, I couldn't help but notice, like, you know, the capability of this for sketching. Actually, this really has an incredible capacity for holding ink. I was going to make fun of that shuttle window. Not that having a little bowl to hold your ink is a bad idea, but just, you know, I don't know. But it really does hold a lot of ink. That's pretty impressive. Okay, this one is more like a 0.5 in terms of line weight. And I personally find it to be a less pleasant writing experience than the Kakimori. The Kakimori was a little bit smoother. And it's not that I don't like feedback with my, like, if we're talking about fountain pens. And they said not to hold it at more than a 45-degree angle. But when you're testing art supplies, rules are meant to be broken. Yeah, okay. I actually have to hold it at a much sharper angle, much closer to my tabletop, if I want those same sort of wider lines that I was getting with the Kakimori nib. This is so neat. So my personal opinion right now is, if you're seeing this and you're like, I like what I see, what do you recommend, Beck? I would recommend getting, my recommendation is the Kakimori brass nib with the less expensive Sakura holder. They do make other holders. I prefer wood holders for my nibs and things like that. It's just easier on my hands. I would recommend that rather than the Shuttle Art nib and the Shuttle Art holder. The Shuttle Art, or the, not Shuttle Art, sorry. I know that's a real brand that exists. They make alcohol markers, or they white label alcohol markers over on Amazon. Anyway, the Shuttle nib is not quite, but close to the same price. I'll put it up on the screen for you guys. Close to the same price as the Kakimori nib, and the holder is about $60. That said, you can kind of work it into a, at least the Kuretake holder. When I tried with the Tachikawa, I didn't really like the fit of it, but it's a little bit better in the Kuretake holder. So if you wanted to try one and you already have a Kuretake holder, that might work. We did try it in the, I'll try it one more time, this time doing the twist, and this is the Kakimori. Yeah, that does not, no, that doesn't want to go in. So even though they look very similar, the Kakimori actually has a very slight, oh, it feels so nice. It's so heavy in the hand. It has a slight decrease between the nib and the, let's call it a ferrule, the collar, whatever. And that allows it to fit in its holder. Whereas the Shuttle Art has, there might be the tiniest amount of a decrease, but it's basically not noticeable. So those are some beautiful colors. And I, like, for today, I do still want to actually keep playing around with these. So give me a sec. I have 3 sheets of paper that I have run through my printer. The first is Strathmore 300 Series Smooth. The second was Strathmore 300 Series Vellum Bristol. And the third was Strathmore 300 Series Watercolor Paper. Figured this would give us a good chance to test these out. I know this is hard for you guys to see. That's kind of intentional. These are blue lines. So we could get into it, but back in the day, photocopiers were not good at picking up these kinds of blues. So these were very common for comic artists to use because they could ink on top of it and basically the sketch would disappear. So the short answer of that. What I want to do with you guys today is we're going to use 4 different inking materials. Order may change and I may need to label it, to ink these adorable Halloween cats. So we have the brush pen, we have a caged G-nib, and we have the 2, I don't even know what to call this style of nib, right? But anyway, the Kakimori and the shuttle nib. So we're going to start on the easiest of the papers and just kind of work our way. Well, it kind of depends on what you're inking with. You know what I mean? Different nibs are going to have different amounts of feedback. We're going to start with this and kind of make our way progressively rougher with the paper. And I definitely plan on starting with the brush pen. Was super relaxing to ink with. I feel like all kind of peaceful and zenned out, and that's great because this is at the end of my work day, so I'm glad it did not stress me out. So next I'm going to move on over to an old friend, the G-nib, just because I enjoy G-nibs. This is one of my favorite things to ink with if I'm inking with a dip pen, and it's a good basis of comparison because it has the cage on it, so it holds a lot of ink. I love inking with a G-nib. This one did not turn out as good as some of my past ones because Bowie decided to hop up on my lap midway. But you guys can see we are capable of, well, first of all, we can notice that the line weight that we have, 2 very different colors, it is the same ink. Dip pens really deposit a lot of ink on the paper and can take a really long time to dry. So I'm going to let this dry and then move on to our 2 unusual nibs. Kakimori nib on the smooth Bristol, it's like a Goldilocks combination. It is very smooth, fairly easy to control, but it is primarily, without some twisting and turning, a fixed line weight sort of line art. So you see how with a few exceptions, everything is kind of the same line weight. Very different from the G-nib up here where we can get some really variable line weights. And also the color differences are pretty shocking. We have a very light version of the color, we have a very dark version of the color, and then we have some beautiful shading going on with the Kakimori nib. So finally, I want to try out the shuttle nib on this last cat. And then we can move on to our vellum Bristol. So that's going to be a slightly rougher texture, but not as rough as watercolor paper. Shuttle nib handled better than I expected. It is kind of scratchy, but it didn't tear up the paper. And in some ways, I found it easier to control than the brass Kakimori nib. But I also want to keep in mind that some of these, I had a cat on my lap or jumping off of my lap. And this is also at the end of a long day. And, you know, my experiences tomorrow might be different. My hand control might be better, that sort of thing. So I mean, I still love this looks very sloppy. That's fine. I know what I can do with the G-nib. I still love the G-nib. I love how smooth the brass Kakimori nib is, but I'm interested to see how well the shuttle nib holds up on more textured paper, because it already gives a good amount of feedback. And I'm also kind of curious to see if the smoothness of the Kakimori nib is going to change with a more textured paper. So now that we finished with the smooth Bristol, we can progress in texture to vellum Bristol. So this is the same cats. We're going to be doing it in the same order of brush, G-nib, Kakimori, and shuttle nib using the same ink. So very little is going to change except for the texture of the paper. The Kakimori brush pen on the vellum Bristol. It is not as smooth as on the smooth Bristol, obviously, but it's a little easier to control on vellum. So if you have tried inking on like a really smooth surface paper and it gives you a little anxiety because it's like ice skating, something with a little more tooth might be a good fit for you, and it might be a little easier to control. The brush is starting to get mushy. It doesn't have... Sorry. The brush is starting to get a little mushy. There isn't as much snap and resiliency as I'd like. If you were using this for calligraphy, it would get beaten up quick. So now we are moving on to the caged G-nib dipped in the Kakimori ink. And I have to say, this little inkwell style ink bottle works really well. I love the fact that it is bottom heavy, so it's going to be tip proof, and that there's a slight angle to it. If you want to use your ink straight up out of the bottle and you want to dip your ink, this is a good way to do it. For fountain pens, you know, I have to test this with a fountain pen to know whether or not it's easy to draw from this bottle, or if you need to like decant it into a vial and then draw from that. I still haven't fully warmed up with the G-Nib. It's been about a year since I inked with it last, and even though I really love inking with G-Nibs, they're such a luxury for me. I just don't make enough time to do it. So it takes a long time for me to get back into the habit. But this one's a little bit better than the last one. And you can start to see some of the beautiful shading that this ink really has to offer. How we have these beautiful, I mean, you could definitely see it with the brush pen, but you can definitely see some of the beautiful darker reds where it's in mass tone. That's one of the reasons I wanted to ink with a traditional pointed, like comics kind of nib, and a G-Nib is most definitely a traditional comics kind of nib, especially if you're a manga fan. So yeah, that's why I wanted to bring that in, is it has this beautiful bouncy line weight, and it can really deposit a lot of ink, and it can really show some of the interesting characteristics that an ink might have to offer. Next, we're going to move on to the Kakimori nib. So I'm starting to get the feel for this nib, and it's a lot of fun. Although vellum Bristol might have too much texture, it might not. It will definitely take more playing around to find out. But I really love how, with just a little bit of a tilt of the angle, you can fill in large areas without scraping and scratching up your paper. That's just something that's not easy to do with dip pens because they deposit so much ink, and because they have such a sharp point, they'll tend to tear up the paper. So traditionally what you might do is, if you're an American inker, you might ink it with your dip pen and then go back with a brush and fill it in later. Or if you are a Japanese inker, you might choose to go in with like zip tone and fill in that area if you were using like traditional means. Obviously, a lot of people work digital or a digital mixed process where some elements are traditional media and some elements are digital. And there are a lot of inkers who just do their spot blacks digitally instead of trying to do that with a brush. So next, we are moving on to the pointier shuttle nib. So there is a lot of feedback with the shuttle nib on this paper. The shuttle nib, as we've talked about already, gives a lot of feedback, and some people like it and some people don't. I kind of like feedback because it gives you more control over the pen. So I don't see it as necessarily a bad thing. It does take some getting used to, but I found that I like both the Kakimori nib and the shuttle nib on the vellum paper. It's a little bit of a learning curve, but it's not too steep. So from the top, for my fellow ADHDs in the audience, or for folks who are just kind of half watching, that's fine, friends. I do the same thing. I like to watch videos while I'm working. This is the Kakimori brush. This is the G-nib with a caged nib. This is the Kakimori nib. This is the brass nib in the Kakimori holder. And this is a shuttle nib by Colorverse in a Kuretake holder. And I am using the Kakimori pigment ink. Oh my gosh, my brain wanted to say particle ink, thinking of pigment particles, but no. Well, yes, pigment ink. So for our final test today, we are going to pull out some Strathmore 300 series watercolor paper. So this is a watercolor paper that has a somewhat assertive texture. It's a cellulose paper. If you're interested in learning more about watercolor papers, I have videos on that. That's not the point of this today. The point of this today is to kind of see how these nibs handle on a paper that has a lot of texture to it. At some point, I would love to try the Kakimori nib on a watercolor paper because I suspect it might work beautifully without tearing up the paper. But that is not today. Today is Strathmore cellulose rather than a cotton rag watercolor paper. The Kakimori brush pen is definitely getting kind of mushy now. It's not like unusable and it's not splitting, but it's not as crisp and sharp as I'd like. So next, we're going to use the G-nib on this paper. So while a caged nib holds a lot of ink, I think the Kakimori nib might actually hold more, or last longer, because a caged nib will also put down a lot of ink. The watercolor paper has held up well to inking. It does take some getting used to, so if you're not a confident inker, if you're not really comfortable with like vellum or more textured surfaces, watercolor paper is going to be like hard mode for you. However, I love a challenge, and I actually really like textured papers, and I like inking on more assertive papers, and I think the Strathmore has a really nice kind of texture to it that, I don't know, I don't like painting on Strathmore 300 series at all. I prefer Canson XL by a long shot, but I kind of like the texture because it's more akin, the XL is kind of smooth for cold pressed cellulose, whereas Strathmore, the rollers they run it through does a better job of giving it kind of like a texture that is noticeable when you're working with it, if that makes sense. This is not at all me recommending Strathmore 300 series watercolor paper. It's just not my preference. If you like it, that's wonderful. I'm just commenting that it is actually pretty fun to ink on. So next, we're going to move on over to the Kakimori nib. The Kakimori nib is fun on this paper. There was no tearing or spidering. It'd be really lovely to try this nib on this paper for a larger illustration where I'm not recording and I can really take my time. So finally, let's do the shuttle nib on the Strathmore watercolor paper. So I am going to circle back in about an hour and do a water test on the watercolor paper to see if this ink reactivates. I want to give it a chance to dry out fully, but I did want to share my thoughts while they were still fresh. So for the Kakimori Tototo ink, I love this ink. It is gorgeous. If it is also waterproof, and it should be because it is a pigment-based ink, and I don't mean fountain pen waterproof, I mean watercolor people waterproof, I will love it even more. As for the Kakimori brush, while it is a lot of fun to be able to use your favorite fountain pen inks in a handy and portable brush pen format, I'm not a big fan of the brush in this brush and would like to try some other brands' empties as well. As for the Kakimori brass nib and holder, I feel like you get a longer line from the Kakimori nib than I was really able to from a G-nib. Of course, a G-nib has a much more dynamic line weight, so you do use a lot more ink, and it also deposits more ink. So that might be a your mileage may vary situation. You are going to go through less ink with the Kakimori nib, but if you're using an inexpensive ink, that might not be a problem for you, or you may like the shading that we get with the G-nib. So hopefully the information I was able to provide by reviewing these will help you make a decision, because you can't say a G-nib is better than a Kakimori nib or vice versa. They're very different things, so it really is kind of up to you. If fewer dips are your goal, though, this is a good way to go. It is a fairly smooth, balanced write. It's fun to draw with as well. It does not fit in a Tachikaba holder or a speedball holder, so and look, maybe you guys, maybe it's the humidity here, maybe who knows what, right? Maybe I've got some dried ink in my holder. If you can cram it into your own holder and you prove me wrong, fair enough. But with the holders that I have and the holders that I tried, I couldn't get it in to anything but the custom holder for it. Believe me, I would have saved myself the money if I could. As for the shuttle nib, which I have in a Tachikaba, no, a Kuretake holder here. While this nib holds a lot of ink, it can be finicky and it provides a lot of feedback. it's probably best on smoother papers. You can get it in and out of a Kuretake holder, so you don't need to buy the expensive nib holder. Again, this is going to be a your mileage may vary sort of situation. You might buy a $7 Kuretake nib holder and find that you're unable to get your shuttle nib into it, but it is still cheaper to try that and see if it works than to spend $60 on the shuttle holder. So you may not need to buy an expensive nib holder if you don't want to. I found that this nib does not work well with the Tachikawa nib holder, so not all nib holders will work with this nib. And honestly, the Tachikawa opening and the Kuretake opening look almost identical. It might be a millimeter or less of difference there. It does not work with a speedball holder at all. Now, I would recommend the Kakimori nib over the shuttle nib at this time. Of course, one is brass and one is aluminum, but just kind of given the handling feel, and I'm assuming the brass version of this would be very similar, I still think the Kakimori is a smoother write and easier for me to use. So are these nibs worth it? They are very different from most other nibs on the market. I have reviewed fountain pens, I have reviewed dip pen nibs for a really long time, and they are different. That's why I bought them. I wasn't looking to buy more of the same. But are they worth it? It totally depends on your goal, but I will say that a caged, and that again refers to the spring, a caged G nib, which is available from Paper and Ink Arts, somebody hand welds all those little springs on there, is a lot of fun, and it can hold a lot of ink, and it's, last I checked, about $10, which seems expensive, but again, someone hand welds the little spring on there very carefully. That's still way cheaper than either of these nibs. I feel like these nibs are for serious pen and nib nerds. They're expensive, they're a bit niche, and they don't neatly solve the issues that many have with dip pens, but they do offer something that's a little bit different. So it really kind of depends on what you're looking to do with these, what your budget looks like, and whether you're looking to add an interesting and esoteric nib to your collection, something that handles kind of like a glass nib, but is easier to use with less grinding. Or if you really just love like traditional dip pens. These are not quite like traditional dip pens. So if you're a fan of Speedball or Crowquill or Bros or Hunt or Tachikawa or Zebra, these are not really the same. So according to Blick, Kakimori pigment inks are light, fast, water resistant inks, and they are perfect for fountain pens, dip pens, and brush applications. So this should work in fountain pens. So it's been about an hour, and I want to test the waterproofness of the Kakimori ink. Blick said it was water resistant, as well, for y'all literally just said, but it was an hour ago. I have ADHD, forgive me. So I am hoping that they are going to be more waterproof than water resistant, but we're gonna find out together. Now, I'm a pretty thorough person, and as you might know, I like to watercolor, so I'm going to be kind of testing this to see how well they will stand up to a watercolor amount of water, and I am using the watercolor paper for this, so it shouldn't be a paper problem. If there is a problem, it's in the ink. So this is our brush. We're going to start with the G-nib because it has the thickest deposit of ink. Aw, that's kind of a shame. We have some beautiful reactivate ability. It's a little unfortunate. we will switch over here now to the Kakimori nib. Okay, so since this has a much thinner deposit, we get less reactivation. And honestly, if we let this dry overnight, it might fully cure instead of allowing it to dry for an hour. We're going to switch over to the shuttle nib. A lot more reactivation there. And then finally, we're going to move to the thinnest application, the brush pen. And there might be a little bit of movement, but I can't really tell. So what I think is if we, oh, and the blue that you might see reactivating, that's from my printer. I printed the blue lines. Sometimes when you add water, they become more noticeable. I have a trick for lifting those up. I'll try to remember to link it for you guys. It's my super secret special trick that I teach everybody. But anyway, I think lighter applications. So if you're doing this for watercolor, using a very fine crow quill, using the Kakimori fine liner, using the Kakimori brush pen, or yeah, using the Kakimori nib itself and not doing any fills like with the eyes, just leaving it kind of an open line work, which is fairly common for people who do watercolor. You can always fill these darker areas in after the fact too. I think that's going to be your best chance for using this ink with watercolor. And I think letting it dry, cure to the paper for 24 hours before you apply water is also probably your best chance. I know fountain pen people would say that this is good enough. This is waterproof for them. This is water resistant for them. What they mean is if it got wet, if it got rained on, it would still be legible. That's why I have to specify that I am looking at this from a watercolorist and an illustrator's lens and not, you know, just as a fountain pen sort of person. That's kind of what makes my viewpoint unique and valuable, and why you should watch my reviews too. I'm not saying it is not usable. You got to know the pros and cons, you got to know the strengths, and you got to know the workarounds of your art supplies. And one of the ways you can do that is by experimenting, spending money, or by watching reviews and watching other people learn so that you don't have to make the same mistakes. So I found myself really enjoying the Kakimori brass nib and the Tototo ink. It's a beautiful color, and I have a field test where I am actually going to ink a piece using the nib and the ink, and I'm going to allow it to cure, to dry fully, and then try watercoloring on top of it. So if you enjoy inking, if you enjoy dip pens, and if you enjoy watercolor, make sure that you're subscribed and you stay tuned for that. So this entire month, I am going to be working on my Little Artist series. It is a series of ink illustrations that kind of go with the Lilliputian Living series that I did the past 8 years. I have finished Lilliputian Living, so if you enjoy tiny, adorable living, if you enjoy miniatures and dollhouses, if you enjoy flights of fantasy and magical escapism, I hope you will check out Lilliputian Living Book 1 and Book 2. The first is the Compendium of Tiny Life, and the second is Les Petits Plaisirs de la Vie, the little pleasures in life. And I get asked this a lot. It is not in French. That has both killed sales because people wanted it to be in French and made people hesitate because they don't speak French. My French is atrocious. I would love to take Creole or Cajun French. I have not. Maybe in the future, I'll be able to put together a Creole and Cajun dictionary with illustrations, which would be like a dream project for me. But no, it's not in French, it's in English. And you can find it in the Natter Shop at nattersuit.com/shop. And if you buy both books at the same time, not only do you save, but I always throw in little extra goodies when you order from my shop. So I hope you guys will follow me on social media to follow the Little Artist series. And of course, I always share art over there. But I really enjoyed taking a look at these. I feel like, at least with Kakimori, I'm gonna come back to Shuttle in another video. Wink, wink, nudge, nudge. But I feel like at least Kakimori is bringing something interesting and unique to the table. It is definitely an excellent nib for people who do like dip pens, but they want a long, smooth write that could be perfect for them. And speaking of dip pins, I actually have these Sailor Hokoro pins that I want to share with you guys at some point. Just not sure how I'm going to, like, what kind of video that's going to look like. So if you're interested in inking utensils, inking tutorials, and inking accoutrements, you are in the right place for the month of October. I have a huge backlog of inking instructions, reviews, nib reviews, and tutorials that I will link for you guys down in the description below. So if you're looking for more inking goodness, make sure you check that out. I hope this was helpful, useful, and informative, inspiring you to make art a habit, especially if you're one of those fountain pen people. Maybe just try doodling a little bit more. Fountain pens are so much fun to draw with, and I have a bunch of videos where I demonstrate just that. But I hope this was helpful in helping you guys make art a habit, and I hope to see you guys again soon with another art supply review or tutorial. Have a wonderful day, guys. Bye.